All right. How's it going, Rich?
Very good. How you doing?
Good, good. I'm glad we jumped on a little early. Chit chat about all kinds of interesting topics, man. So,
That's what the fun part.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So, we can see the attendees slowly file in. I don't know, we'll wait a little bit, typically, maybe till there's about 50 or so folks, and then we'll jump in. Um, but yeah, Rich, I expected you to be in New York today.
I got to be quiet just in case somebody sees this. But yes, I was supposed to be in New York uh, with my wife and son, doing some shopping. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, all right, all right. Oh, okay. Oh man, yeah. I
That,
I, I almost shot ourselves in the foot there. Pretty.
I don't think I don't think this they would be watching this webinar. They're not in the space, so I don't expect
Oh
them to
man. Okay. All right. Yeah, I
at the
will.
end blow any whistles.
Yeah, that would have been a webinar first. That'd be pretty bad, man. So.
It's always fun to be a webinar first, but that's probably not the thing to do it on.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, Andrew is in the background from AP trying to, make sure and keep this flowing. So Andrew, whenever you feel the attendee list is filled in enough, you can proceed to the next slide. But until then, we'll just kind of, I don't know, fill the void with our chatter.
Well, either that or we watch the attendance start dropping, then we know we got to start.
Yeah, yeah. If it goes the other way, yeah,
Then we're in trouble.
that's actually kind of funny. But yeah, we'll maybe give it just one more minute here. It's 2 minutes past now,
Awesome.
and it's an honor, Rich. I mean, I think if I'm correct, this is our first ever webinar with Activeprospect and Anura. So it's kind of hard to believe, to be honest, after all these years.
Yeah, we've been together. We've been working together. I want to say 4+ years, maybe 3, 4 years, something like that. And I really haven't done a lot of webinars. I think this is my third, honestly, in almost 30 years of being in the space. I just haven't done a lot of them. And I did one last year, and we generated a couple clients off of it, and a lot of good interest, a lot of good questions. I do it more or less just to obviously get a brand out like everybody else, but try to educate the market on what's actually going on in the market, because it's if you knew what I knew, you'd be scared. The
Yeah.
things that these guys can do and push through and get away with, and they're getting away with it right now as we speak. Now you start compiling in the TCP lawsuits that are happening. I spoke to somebody, and I'll leave the person nameless because he's pretty well known in the industry, and he says he's run some call centers where he's gone to people, and he remembers this, going up to people and asking why their production is so low, and they're like, I'm calling the leads, but they're telling me they didn't fill out a form. And he's like, well, then they just filled out the form 3 seconds ago. We've got all the data. Like, he was insistent, didn't realize it was fraud. He said, now I feel bad because didn't realize it was an issue, but
Oh, 100%, Rich. I know at the TCPA summit, you and I attended the one in Florida last time. We missed Huntington Beach, which I heard was awesome. They
yeah.
were talking about fraud being one of the major targets of litigation, right? So it's not just wasted marketing spend; it's TCPA risk. But looks like we should jump in now. So the topic today: combat fraud and make every lead count. Recession-proof your marketing budget. And I don't know if you just saw the GDP numbers come out this morning. I know it's not technically a recession yet, but wait, I think it is technically a recession. You can't call it a recession, but our timing is kind of remarkable. We didn't even know today was going to be the day the GDP numbers came out for Q2. So I think glad we don't have to change the name of the webinar on the fly here. But if you want to go to the next slide, there you go. So these are the panelists. I was kind of laughing to myself. I am the moderator of now a 2-person panel. I might start referring to myself as a committee if this trend continues. Yeah, so even though Rich is speaking for all of the world of fraud, I think he is very well positioned to do so. A little background about me. My name is Young. I've been in the lead gen space for about 7 years, 8 years now. Prior to that, I was a business intelligence analyst doing digital analytics, trying to solve some pretty difficult data problems. And from there, I kind of put my brain on hold a little bit and went into marketing for a lead gen company called Benepath. Wonderful people there. There, I ended up learning all about the different marketing channels and how they performed and the different ways marketers can leverage consent-based marketing. I had the opportunity to choose our consent documentation solution, and I ended up going with Activeprospect. So I became a customer first, and then chance would have it, position opened up, and that was about a little under 3 years ago, and I've been loving it ever since. So yeah, I'm excited about the conversation, Rich, if you can give us a little background.
Funny you should say that. Now that you say that you were a customer first, I'm technically a customer of Anura before running the company, so that's kind of interesting. Anyway, yeah, my name is Rich Khan. I've been in the digital marketing space since '93, so coming up right now 29 years in the space. I've done everything that you can imagine from a development standpoint, from SEO to web development. Fraud detection has been a big part of my career because fraud's been around since the dawn of time. But actually, I was an advertiser in another company, and we were having issues with what we realized was fraud. So I built a solution to solve it because there was nothing out there in the marketplace that actually solved it. So I started building a solution that worked great until it didn't, and then you had to re-evolve and continue building upon it. So technically, like you, I was a customer of the product before we actually started created a brand out of it and started selling it as a separate product. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, I had no idea. In 29 years, Rich, wow.
Yeah, long time. It's funny, I always tell people it's, most of the people like me have been retired by now. They've sold the company and they're retired. I'm still working on
it. Yeah, man. Well, all right, let's jump into the topics for today. Andrew, just kind of rapid fire. I'm not going to read them out. Can you just, show them all? So we have 5 topics today. They all revolve around protecting your business from fraud and improving the ROI from every dollar you spend in marketing. So they all kind of flow into one another. I won't read them out loud because we're going to go over them. So next slide, please. So first topic, how to increase compliance and protect yourself against fraudulent leads. Next slide, please. So if you're joining this webinar and you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, I've been doing this for a while and now it's too embarrassing to ask, where do I start? Or you're feeling behind the 8 ball. I always lead people to the bulletproof stack. And I know, experts like Eric Troutman and Michelle Schuster will say, hey, you got to change that name. But I think let's call it the bulletproof vest stack, right? I mean, it's a great place to start. And basically, the goal is to have a foundation, build a defensible TCPA position. I think that is the term that a lot of people use. If you go through here, it's trusted form. That is an Activeprospect solution. It is the industry standard for documenting consent. Our script is running on tens of thousands of sites. Whenever a consumer opts in, we are there to help archive and then capture that playback, as well as ensure that the consent language you chose is on there. And that can form the foundation, the bedrock of your TCPA position. You can verify whether the phone number matches the name, but also use integrations like Anura to ensure that the lead is not a fraudulent lead, it's not suspicious, checks for bots and frauds, but also do things like litigator scrubs, right? Things like DNC.com is a great litigator scrub, as well as Blacklist Alliance. Yeah, Rich, I mean, any guide or advice for people who are kind of just getting started in this topic?
Yeah, if you're just getting started in this topic, as you can see, consent is important, obviously for obvious reasons. Fraud's important because you don't want to be paying for fraud or creating, having fraudulent leads go down your funnel and end up in your client's hands. The last thing anybody wants is to have a client call back and say, hey, I found fraud and you didn't. I just spoke to somebody the other day and he says about twice a year this happens to him. And it's bad because most of the time the client just leaves. and then they call up and find out what's happening. It was fraud. They didn't have an opportunity to solve it. So, from a compliance area and from lead checks, there's a lot of things you need to do in a space. It's not just anymore like, hey, somebody filled out a form, it's good to go. There's a lot of compliance and checks that you need to do in place, and fraud plays a big role in that.
Yeah.
So that's why it's this stack that you have here covers. And granted, there's a lot more you could probably add to this, but in a bulletproof stack, the way it's listed, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can say that. This is probably a great place to start. This will give you your compliancy. This will make sure the data checks out behind the scenes. It's not part of somebody who's actively out there trying to sue people, and it's not fraud. So you're covering a good chunk of the bases with just these 4 technologies right out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying that, Rich, it reminded me, I had a conversation with the call center not too long ago, and for them it was employee retention, right? Their agents, he told me they can only be screamed at X number of times before they quit, right? And so you keep the number of times to get chewed out down. And so improving lead quality was not only about protecting the company and having marketing ROI, but retaining agents, because right now it's so competitive for good people. So it's just another fold, right? It goes deeper than just.
It's funny you bring that up, because I had a call. I was doing a demo with one of my reps, and the person was getting into like all this stuff, because we have the 4 major negative impacts of fraud, and we're going to have a slide on that. But he says, "Oh, you're missing one." I'm like, "Oh, what is it?" He goes, "Company staff morale."
Yeah.
And he goes, "You can't right now." and the average company we come across has got 25% fraud. So he's got 1 in 4 calls that they're calling. They're yelling at him. Like, this is supposed to be, this is not cold calling, right? Where you expect to get yelled at. This is inbound, where somebody quote unquote filled out a form, and you're calling somebody and they're getting irate at you because of the fact they didn't fill out your form. So the company morale drops. So you can solve that. Again, that is another impact of a negative lead, of a bad lead.
Yeah, people don't talk about it that much, but yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you're also hearing that. Andrew, next slide. We're gonna mix it up. We're gonna have a poll question, get people a little more interactive here. So what percentage of leads are saying they never filled out your form? So it's different quartiles here. I don't know how long we should give people, but
yeah, 20 or 30 seconds just to get a couple people interacting with it to see what we get.
Oh, it's cool. You can actually see it in real time. I mean, the audience can't, but we can. It's kind of like
oh yeah, check that out.
Yeah. Okay, it's been 36 seconds. So let's give it a minute. Let's give it a full minute, and then we'll kind of call it. But yeah, that's cool. So you can see 60% have voted. Doesn't seem like that's moving much. So Andrew, if you want to go ahead and share the results. All right. Now, Rich, I'm going to let you kind of take the lead on kind of explaining this one.
Yeah, so essentially what we see, so these are people that you call them and they swear up and down they didn't fill out a form. So what we're looking at here is, and again, this is just a quick poll just to give you guys an idea, what we find on average, and it does range, depends on all the different things you're doing, with the sources you're buying from, the channels of marketing that you're using to generate that lead. It'll range from, I've seen, a couple people with 5 or 6% on the low side. I've seen people with, I just got off the phone with somebody today, 87% of fraud is what's filling out their forms. And the sweet spot, the average across the board is 25%. That's what we see. So here's an example of what's happening. So one of the more sophisticated attacks, you got a fraudster from around the globe, human fraud farms from around the globe. They come to a form, they're given a form to go fill out, and they're giving a database of names and information to fill out. So let's say you get Young's information, they got your phone number, they got your email address, they come to a form, they fill out the form. They don't get caught because they're not a bot, which is what most detection software out there is looking for. They fill out the form, they hit submit, it goes to the next thing. Now, Activeprospect is going to catch where the lead came from, record the whole transaction, make sure you're compliant on that side. And then you're going to do the background data checks to see does the name match the email address. So you check all that. All that looks good. They're not on the DNC scrub list. You pass the bulletproof check. Without something like Anura in place, That gets through, it goes to the call center, you pick up the phone and call somebody, and they call you and find out you never filled out a form. So
Hmm.
that's an example. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that the attack can take place, but that's a typical example of what's happening. And our job is to step in there and help identify who is behind the keyboard on that transaction. You want to make sure it's a real person. It's not bots, malware, or human fraud forms that are filling those forms on behalf of somebody else.
Wow. Yeah, that's it's remarkable, and the range is obviously very great. We all know that different marketing channels and traffic sources differ, but 25% is remarkable and significant. You know, 6, 7, even 8-figure marketing budgets. That is a tremendous amount of money that you can reinvest and get more out of it. So,
I mean, just looking at this poll, 10% of the people are saying more than 50% of their leads are saying that they never fill out the form. That's high. That's something that's 911, because you can't run a business that way.
yeah,
You're constantly dealing with having to, chargebacks and issues, and you're just waiting for, a major issue to take place. That's a big problem.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That was a very interesting poll, Rich. I had no idea that the problem was that pervasive. So the next topic is how to avoid wasting ad money on how to increase your ROI through effective fraud mitigation. Oh, sorry, I was jumping ahead there, Rich. Next slide. All right, let's have you walk us through this, Rich.
Yeah, so again, we typically, when we talk to people, we talk about the 4 negative impacts of fraud when it comes to lead generation. So the first thing, and obvious thing, is you spent money. It doesn't matter whether it was, a tier 1 search, social, affiliates, programmatic, wherever the lead came from, you spent money on a lead that's never going to truly convert. So again, it's just somebody filling out somebody else's information. That's a problem. Now, if you're making a lot of these phone calls and you tend to be a bigger brand, what's going to end up happening is people are more concerned with what you're filling out, like what you're, how you got their information versus what you're trying to sell them. So that can create a brand reputation issue if you do enough calls. The next thing is, I always talk about wasted call center resources. So think of it this way. If you filled out a form right now to save money on your car insurance right now, hit enter, and within a minute your phone starts ringing, you're kind of expecting that. So you're going to answer the phone most of the time, right? But let's say you're just sitting at your desk working, and all of a sudden your phone rings with a number you don't recognize. Do you answer that call? Most people don't, right? No. So what happens is it's harder to reach somebody who's not expecting that call. So you're going to spend more time in your call center resources, and that adds up. And then finally, if somebody calls you and they don't have express permission to call you, that's a TCPA violation. Whether you get called out on it or not is something different, but it is a risk. And every lawyer will tell you the goal is to reduce as much risk as possible when you're in business, right? So you're trying to reduce that TCPA level. In fact, like I said, Activeprospect is doing everything to make sure that you're not breaking that from on the form side. So which is important, because you want to make sure that's all compliant. And at the same token, last thing you want to do is break that TCPA compliance by calling somebody who didn't give you permission to call them. So those are the 4 major impacts. There are other obvious reasons. We've talked about one with, call center morale, calling leads at 1 in 4 leads that they're calling are saying that they didn't fill out a form. They're getting yelled at. That's not what you're looking for. But these are the 4 major impacts of fraud.
No, you're absolutely right,
In
Rich.
fact, I'm getting a call right now from spam, so I'm not going to answer because I don't know who it is.
That happened one of our practice sessions. That was somebody must have your info somewhere, man.
Well, we talked about this just as we were putting this together. I have somebody who's insisting they're trying to reach me by phone, by email. They haven't tried LinkedIn yet, but they're trying to reach me because they said I filled out a form in order to get a new trademark attorney. I've been working with the same trademark attorney for the last 15 years. I have no desire to change. And I'm insisting to them that it's fraud, and she's guaranteeing me it's not. So I said, great. I want the IP address that filled out that form so I can prove to you that it wasn't me.
You were like the one guy that you shouldn't talk about this. It's almost like in Taken, right? Liam Neeson's like, you messed with the wrong guy here. But it's that's funny. One of the interesting things, you mentioned brands, larger brands. I remember I've had many conversations and they say, I don't know if this is brand right to be interacting with consumers via text or even calling them. But this kind of goes to the core of what we're trying to do. I mean, as a lead gen industry in general, right? I mean, lead gen has gone from kind of this like underdog type marketing channel to something that's developed. It's grown up a lot. And what Activeprospect and companies like Anura, what we're trying to do is build that framework so that consent-based marketing as a channel can be there with email, with cost per click, native display, social. We are an incremental marketing channel that can help drive business for the largest brand. So excited to be part of that process. And to Rich, your point, if you can go to the next slide. One of the ways where Anura and Activeprospect work very closely together is to help avoid wasting money in real time. We do that by sitting in the middle, right? So Lead Conduit is Activeprospect's platform, and within Lead Conduit, and it's important. This graphic's important because it shows where we fit in the flow. So on the left, you see everywhere where the consumer is giving their opt-in. It could be their owned and operated site. It could be third-party lead vendors. It could be Facebook lead ads or even a mobile app. Anywhere the consumer is filling out and giving their consent, our script is there. That lead goes into Lead Conduit, and from there, we make sure it's compliant. We leverage tools like Anura to ensure that it's not a bot or fraudulent lead. Check things like to see if it's a contactable lead, so on and so forth. And because we're in front of your system, because we're before, we can reject in real time, and thus sometimes before you pay for it, right? So there's a huge marketing savings by doing things at the point of acceptance instead of later on, like a week or a month later, and try to get a refund. So yeah, Rich, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I mean, being in tech, anytime we can bring logic further upstream, make it more real time, I mean, that's obviously the win, right?
Yeah. No, and this is, again, the way that everything's tied in, it makes it easy for your clients to be able to opt into this technology by just a little checkbox, right? So they can easily check the box, add Anura into the mix, and immediately know that we're going to start blocking anything that is obvious fraud and get it out of the system so that it doesn't go further down the chain and they're protected.
Yeah, and making sure a bad lead doesn't make it into your system in the first place. It might not seem that important, but it is. I've worked with a lot of people who once data gets into their system, logic can get messed up. I mean, you might end up dialing it. Things can happen. So making sure it doesn't even get in is actually quite important. So
think of it from the analytics side too. You've got a lot of people looking at all the numbers behind the leads that come through the system. And again, based on what we're seeing, 25% of leads are fraud. If a quarter of your data is tainted with fraudulent leads, you're going to start making good decisions based on bad data. And that only creates or exacerbates the problem, makes it worse. So again, trying to keep your data clean. We have a lot of analysts that will sign up for our software just to keep the data coming into their system clean for that reason.
Yeah. Oh, Rich, I love that. Making good decisions on bad data. I might have to steal that from you. So, Andrew, wonderful. So I included this slide. I mean, it's not really sure it's the right, actually, I know it's not the right webinar for this, but I wanted to tease it. Trusted form insights. This could be a topic for an entire webinar series. I just wanted to bring it up because trusted form has long been known as the highest standard of proof for TCPA compliance, but we also collect significant amounts of useful data to help you buy leads more intelligently, both on the ping and on the post. And I want to share kind of why we started doing this. It was, I forget how many years, but it was years ago, one of our most sophisticated clients said, hey, I know a lot about my customers. They come to our site, based on the device they have, what kind of browser, how they're clicking or tabbing, typing speed, everything, things in their user agent string. So I'm using all this information to close my leads at a higher clip. I'm having operational efficiencies. God, it'd be wonderful if I could know that about my third-party leads. And we said, oh, okay. What would be useful and what would feel would be a fair thing to divulge, and we came up with Trusted Form Insights, and it's kind of like ready for prime time now, right? We are working with a lot of people on this exciting new, not new, I could say, but also I don't want to give away too much, but there's a new case study coming out where one of our biggest clients, over 30% of the most useful features in their data model set are derived from Trusted Form Insights. So it was pretty awesome. I mean, yeah, I'll let that sink in. But Rich, if you had anything to add here.
Sure. So our current integration with you guys inside of Activeprospect is what we call a ping, right? It's an API endpoint, and the reason for it is when you're going down that decision tree, you have milliseconds to make decisions as to what to do with this data at that point. So right now we have the Anura direct integration that's fully tied in, check of a box, and you're up and running. However, that is designed to collect what's called GIVT data, so general invalid traffic, which is your more obvious levels of fraud, bots, data center attacks, things like that. And it does catch quite a bit of fraud from what we're seeing across the board. However, there are more sophisticated attacks that can hit people. So Trusted Form is a piece of JavaScript that lives on your client side, right? So the clients put the JavaScript on there to track everything and do all that stuff. We also have a JavaScript called Anura script, very simple name. The idea behind that is that's there to catch the more sophisticated levels of fraud. It's called SIVT, so sophisticated invalid traffic. And we're actually collecting over 800 data points on the user's environment. So you're talking about hardware, software, plugins, anything and everything we can grab. So think of it this way. Somebody comes to your site, everything looks good on Trusted Form. They're coming from an iPhone, everything looks great. We do the scan using our JavaScript and identify they don't have a touchscreen. That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But how many people are collecting that type of data? Now that's an old type of piece of data, but it's still useful, still relevant. We're collecting 800 different types of data points like that. And based on that data, we're able to respond back. And what's nice with us is we're the only solution in the marketplace to achieve a greater than 99.999% accuracy rating when identifying fraud. So in the lead space, false positives, which a lot of solutions have issues with, it costs you money, right? So imagine if you were getting a bunch of your traffic marked as fraud and 10% of all of that, 10 percentage points of all that was wrong. That's costing you a lot more money than the solution cost itself. So is it really helping you out or not? With us, since we dominate in the lead generation space and performance marketing space, accuracy is paramount. We had to make sure we don't have false positives. Now we say 99.999% because we're human. Every once in a while, something does slip by, but it's rare. When we're scanning 3 billion visitors a day, that gives us 1 in 100,000 to be wrong. So it's very rare that it happens.
Wow, that's a tremendous amount of data, Rich, and yeah, that's wild. 99.99%. That is the first question a lot of my more sophisticated clients will ask me. What's the friendly fire rate, right? And they try to match it up and figure out, what is this invalidating? Because they want more volume, right? They're trying to grow their company. So any kind of friendly fire, right, or false positives is a step in the wrong direction, right? It's almost like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So that's wonderful. That yeah. So I guess as a next step, and we'll talk about this at the end. Before a step beyond what I'm not forget the acronym you use, but the kind of initial bot fraud scrub that exists as the endpoint from Lead Conduit. If you reach out to Rich and his team, there are kind of more sophisticated solutions that they can provide. So moving on to the next slide, Andrew. I think this GIF or GIF, actually, Rich, how do you pronounce it? Is it GIF or GIF?
You know what? I've been in the space since '93. We all called it GIF because it was just missing a for gift. I think the people who created it call it GIF. I'm still going to call it GIF. That's just how I grew raised in the industry. I'm calling it GIF.
Okay, all right, GIF. Well, this GIF should show just how easy it is to leverage Anura, right? So within our platform, and it also shows off kind of our interface here. I love IT. IT people are wonderful. If you're listening, IT people at AP, I love you. But IT has a way of getting backlogged, right? The word sprint has kind of become a dirty word for me. What's beautiful about our platform is it gives control back to the marketer, right? So when you're trying to onboard a new source and create submission docs, whether you're trying to figure out things like acceptance criteria, adding integrations, sending leads to a certain dialer or emailer or both or CRM. You can do all of that with Lead Conduit without any IT support. It's just point and click, drag and drop. This GIF shows adding Anura, right? It's literally, I think, 3 clicks. You have to determine whether or not you want to immediately reject those leads or not. I mean, it's about as easy as you can make it. So we can move on to the next slide here. All right, cool. Number 2. All right, what percentage of third-party, otherwise known as affiliate leads, would you consider to be fraudulent?
Now, this is an interesting one because every channel of marketing has different levels of fraud. I'm just curious to see what the audience thinks is fraudulent in their opinion on third-party leads or affiliate-based leads.
Yeah, I can tell you this varies drastically.
Well, again, it also varies drastically from affiliate to affiliate, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because there are good affiliates and there are not as good affiliates, right? I want to say, I love the affiliate marketing side of things because it's going to get your most cost-effective lead, but you got to have the right technology in place to protect yourself so you don't get beaten.
Absolutely. I remember as a lead vendor. Oh, here we go. Let's kind of jump in here. All right. So more even distribution across the board here. So we're seeing everywhere between from 0 and 75%. Rich, I know you kind of gave away earlier what the percentage was.
Yep.
How do you make of this data here?
This is, you got some outliers. I guess a lot of optimistic people thinking it's between 0 and 25%. And then you got a few that are seeing some really high stuff, 75 to 100%. The actual, and again, this is based on our data that we've been collecting for the last 17 years. And I don't know the scale up ratio, but right now we're scanning about 3 billion visitors a day. So it's coming with a lot of data. The average across our entire network of what we see is 45%.
Wow. Wow.
So almost 1 in 2 of traffic coming from affiliates we find to be fraudulent. Okay. And again, you've got that varying group of, it depends on the affiliate, I'm just looking at average.
You know what, that makes sense. And when you first said it seemed too high, but when you're looking at the universe of all affiliate leads, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of looking at, my trust, like back when I was a vendor, you buy from guys like, Excel Impact or Quote Wizard, like very reputable companies, Suited Connectors, companies of that, or EverQuotes of the world, you can probably expect much less. But if you're looking at everyone, right, everyone you meet at Affiliate Summit, let's say.
Good spot.
Yeah, that seems about right.
I'll give you a funny story because again, this is not going to call anyone out. I had my team over at Affiliate Summit. Let me think. I think it was last year, and they had several, not just one, but several people swing by the booth and say, "You make my job more difficult." That's exactly what we're here to do. We're not trying to let you cheat the system. We want the good stuff. The problem is, affiliates start off by sending good traffic, make sure they pass the sniff test. Then when you get comfortable with the traffic, they start rolling in the fraud up until you complain. And they'll just roll it in, staging it in so that if you don't say anything, they'll keep passing it by. And I'll backtrack a second. It's usually not the person you deal with, right? So if you're dealing with an affiliate and you're good friends with somebody, a perfect example, a couple of years ago, I was talking to somebody, run affiliate marketing, and I pointed out somebody had 40% fraud. He says, okay, I'm gonna have a conversation with this guy today. The only problem is we were college roommates. How do I handle this? And I said, well, first off, let me set you at ease. I guarantee it's not your college roommate that's trying to rip you off, right? It's somewhere where he gets his traffic that he doesn't even know. He doesn't have any tools in place to identify good and bad traffic. So it's somewhere downstream, and we'll be able to figure out where that is. And the conversation went well, and he was able to identify 2 downstream sub-affiliates that were causing the issue, eliminate them, and see a significant increase in performance. So yeah, affiliates, there are generally are the ones you talk to are not the ones trying to commit the fraud.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Rich. I mean, I agree completely. It can be a tangled web, and uh, once again, trusted form. When I started leveraging originating domain as kind of my true north, right? When you know where it's generated, you can really get granular all the way down to who generated it originally, right? And that's that's the level. And subsources are useful always, but they oftentimes don't tell the full story because, to your point, those subsources can be derived from other places. But
Yeah, and think
that's
about it.
great.
How
That's
many
great, Rich. Yeah, it's
Look at it this way, real quick. How many affiliates generate 100% of their own traffic?
I can name them probably on one hand of the ones I know. As
Those are
far
the
as
ones
all
that
go. Yeah,
probably have the lower end of the fraud. Like they probably don't have a lot of fraud.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the ones that get from a lot of different sub affiliates. That's where you get into trouble because then you
yeah.
lose track of exactly where the traffic is coming from, how it's being. You lose all that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, Rich. And one thing I always try to mention and impress upon folks is that a lot of what we're talking about is rejecting fraudulent leads, and fraudulent leads are bad leads. You want to reject them. But as you start working with your quality vendors and people that you trust, and you want to grow their business so they can continue to help grow yours, there should be an honest conversation saying, hey, I'm noticing this much of your data is not real. Whatever's left is working really well. How do we right price that remaining data so that you can continue to generate these leads at a margin that you need to then have this virtuous cycle where you can continue generating and we can all win together, right? And I always want to mention that because if it's just cutting, it's a race to the bottom for everyone, right? I mean, there's short-term gains, but then if you cut off your ability of your quality vendors to stop generating, it can be a big problem. Hence, actually, one topic we didn't hit on, and I don't know if we were planning on, but was leveraging data insights on the ping, right? So trusted form insights can be used on the ping and the post. I love this idea of using it on the ping for more insight further upstream, can give you more flexibility in what you do with that data. So instead of just accepting, rejecting, you can bid more intelligently. You can say, hey, this looks like a really great lead. We couldn't tell that by the non-PII, but boy, right, based on this other information, I really want this. I'm going to bid up, right? So the vendor has upside, not just a downside. But I know Anura can be leveraged on the ping as well, correct?
Right. All depend. I mean, we could be. That's what the Anura Direct is all about. It's being used on the ping, so you can decide should I even bid on this lead or not. And if we're saying it looks clean, then you can use the other data to decide should I be bidding more on this lead, because if you're just bidding across the board, and we'll stick with 25% for now, is fraudulent. You're bidding on 25% of leads that are just never going to convert. It's watering down the ROI. So like you said, when you talk about smart pricing, what happens? Your clients start smart pricing you because those leads, because they're muddied down with fraudulent leads, are only worth so much to them. However, when you eliminate that fraud, all of a sudden your leads become more valuable and they want more of it and they're willing to pay more for it. And that's really an advantage to having a solution like us in place, is to help take advantage of that market in the right place. And then how many people would be happy never to get a call from a client saying, we found fraud? Like, you don't want a client calling you up and saying that. You're trying to build a brand and grow your company. The last thing you want to be able to find it before, you want to add that value to it before it becomes an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good kind of ending statement, right? You want to get ahead of it. We kind of bounced around on all these different topics, but I think where we landed is that this problem is growing, but there are solutions in place with things like Anura, our platform, Lead Conduit, to take advantage of these data insights in real time, as well as our more sophisticated clients who work in a ping post environment can even leverage this on the ping. So I strongly encourage anyone who's interested to reach out to us directly or to our companies via the websites to carry on a more detailed conversation afterwards. But yeah, let's open up to any questions that we might have. Andrew, we have a bunch of questions come in.
Max Hunt has one. He asks, aren't those affiliates responsible for their clients and their processes?
So This came up in a talk I was doing in a panel discussion. Everyone was asking, who's responsible to stop the fraud? Everybody. Nobody cares more about your business than you. So while you can turn around to your affiliates and say, yes, the responsibility is on your shoulder to make sure the traffic is clean, they say yes, and their sub-affiliates still send fraud. If they're not catching it, somebody's got to catch it. And if you're the one who's getting that lead and then selling it to a client, you're ultimately responsible to your client for selling that lead, whether it's good or bad. So it's, I hate to say it, but it's everybody's responsibility to keep an eye on fraud, because everybody's getting paid off of that. So you got to invest a little bit of tech in there to make sure what you're sending down and selling or using yourself internally is real. So it's really everybody's.
We have another question here from Jeffrey Randolph. He raised his hand, so I'll let him ask you himself.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm not seeing Jeff has the ability to speak. Can we have him type it in?
Yes, Jeff, you could just type it in and submit it. We can read it that way. I unmuted you, but it's not coming through.
And while he's doing that, I just want to.
Hey, now can you hear me?
Oh,
yeah,
we can hear you, Jeff.
Helps if I unmute myself as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leverage off that first question, and essentially, like, depending on buying channel, like, what would be best practice though? Rich, I understand, like, everybody's responsible for fraud, but to Young's, and we also want to efficiently run a business, acquire high quality, compliant, non-fraudulent leads. So just from a best practice, depending on kind of sourcing, whether it's a data buy, you're buying calls, what should be a best practice where the fraud check should technically lie?
So
also from an ease of implementation too.
Sure. So ultimately, a good question. So ultimately, I would say if we had to narrow it down to one person, it's the person that's generating that lead, right? Who's driving traffic in from some source, landing on a landing page, and then having that form filled. Whoever's got that form filled out ultimately should be doing their due diligence to keep it clean. On your side, if you're just buying the data, what you can do and what you should do is vet out each and every source. Where are you getting the leads? What are you using for fraud detection? What are you using for compliance? Like, you have to do your due diligence and make sure they're doing everything 100%. That's how you get out. Like I said, if you're just the one buying the leads, that's the way you're going to do it. But again, when I talk to clients, most clients, they're doing such volume of business that if you can trust every single one of your sources to do that, that's great. I come from a world of identifying fraud. I trust nobody. I want to see it for myself, and that's just how I am. But like I said, if I had to pick one person responsible, it's the person who's actually getting the visitor, who owns that landing page where they're filling out that form.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to that point, Rich, once again, I hate to keep repeating the same thing, but originating domain has been truly a remarkable tool for helping identify where leads originate from, and oftentimes you'll see patterns with who's generating that and who's having these issues. And so that can be an important factor. Within Lead Conduit's platform, you can do things like page scan to ensure that your necessary compliance language is on that page, and things like Anura and right party validation. Some of our clients actually flag the data as it comes in, as to not restrict volume, but to then perhaps treat certain leads differently. So it'll flag and say, hey, this didn't quite meet. Let's look at it differently, or have a manual process for these leads. Also, as people purchase things like warm transfers, if there's a trusted form associated with it, you can document consent and the compliance language is sufficient. Hey, maybe this can be part of our outbound flow if it doesn't convert on that call, but if not, then it's a one and done. It's a call. If it doesn't convert, I'm not going to do anything to it. So I think there's a lot of nuance involved in that, but yeah, I mean, that is the question we're all trying to suss out while trying to scale, right? And so one thing I think our CEO talks a lot about is, some of our most successful clients cast a very wide net. So they work across dozens and dozens of vendors, but they know what they want, and they can identify the cohort of leads that work for them. Yeah, and that's a way to minimize risk as well.
Great, thanks.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you, Jeffrey and Max. Rich, did you have any other kind of parting thoughts? I feel we made great time. It's just feel like we covered the topics, and we're giving people, I don't think we're giving them any time back, but we're not taking more from them. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, it's a very interesting industry. Because again, when I started one of my first companies and was running into issues, it was click fraud, right? And then we later started doing e-com fraud, and we started seeing lead fraud as the different technologies that evolved. And everybody's familiar with click fraud, but when it comes to lead gen fraud, everyone's like, well, somebody filled out a form, so it can't be fraud. And that's unfortunately not the truth. I mean, these fraudsters, this year alone, they're expecting to steal over $100 billion in advertiser funds. So I always tell people, it's not a question of if you have fraud, it's a question of how much fraud you have. So It's just a matter of really understanding where it's all coming from, so that you can do your best to minimize that and get the best quality leads for you and your clients.
Yeah, Rich, that's a great point. It's all our problems. I think every single lead's leads are devalued because of the overall fraud that can exist in the industry. It's in economic terms, it's an externality that we all pay a price for. So, I think, it's a great way to end it on, Rich, and looking forward to continue to build with you and to help support our hundreds of clients as they leverage your technology and hopefully bring more of that technology up to the ping as well. So
excellent.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time.
Yeah. See you.